Hello, this is problem number 5, and in this problem number 5 we're given the matrix where one of the elements could be equal to 0, and if the problem is that we have to write an algorithm, and we need to find out the element which is equal to 0, and when we find out the 0, we need to change the entire row where we will be able to find the 0, all elements in that column or row to 0. So let's consider these two examples. So here we have input of matrix where 0 is the last element of two-dimensional array, for example. And since we see that the 0 is at the index, like if it's matrix, so if it's 1 1, so we need to change all elements at the row 1 to 0 and all elements at the column 1 to 0. So output will be basically looks like this. So all elements at column 1 and all elements at column at row 1 are changed to 0. So in the second example, where we have this input where the 0 is the first element of the two-dimensional array, and we're just changing the all elements from the first row and from the first column to zeros. So how it's gonna work, let's consider two examples how I'm gonna handle this problem. First of all, I will declare two arrays, which will be one for row and another for columns. By default, the values will be false, and the length of the row will be equal to the number of rows in the given matrix, and the array for columns will be the number of columns in the given matrix. And I will go through my matrix. When I see the 0, I will just change the default value of false to true. For example, I will, in my rows array, I will try to find out in which index I will have 0 value, and for the columns I will try to find out in which column I will have a 0 value, and I will change the default false value of element to true. So for example, for the first given array, I will go through the matrix, and at the index 0 0 I will see that it's 1. Oh, so it's 1. Next element is also 1. So next element is 1, and the last element is 0. So my arrays, rows as columns will be changed accordingly, and I will see that the index number 1 is values are changed to true. So each time when I write my when I will run my for loop again through this matrix, each time when I will see the 1 either on the row or the column of the matrix, I will change the value to 0. So for example, matrix 0 0, I will not gonna touch it because the indexes are all zeros. The next index is 0 and 1. Since here is a 1, I will change it to 0. And here again I see 1. I'm taking it from this row arrays. I will change it to 0, the value in the matrix. And when I see that there are 2 1s in the address, in the indexes are 1, I will also change it to 0. So as an input we will have this matrix. So for the second example, our arrays of booleans will be changed in accordingly in that way. We see that the elements at 0 indexes are true. So when we will run our for loop again through our matrix, each time we will see the one of the indexes equal to 0, we'll change the element inside of the matrix to 0. So for example, matrix 0 0, I will change it to 0. Matrix 0 1, I will change it to 1. Matrix 0 2. So when we see that there are no zeros in the index, the values will be untouched. So the output value for the given second example will be like this. So let's try to write our function now, and our function will be look like this. So as an output, we will need to return two-dimensional array. I will call it, let's call it put 0, and the input will be two-dimensional array. Let's call it matrix, mat as for a matrix, and I will assume that I will be given the number of rows under m and the number of columns under n value. So in my function, I will declare two arrays. One is for rows, two boolean arrays, which will be equal to the number of rows in the matrix, and the second array will be for columns, and the size of this array will be the number of columns in the matrix. So first of all, I will run the first for loop, and my first loop will be loop through the all rows in the matrix. That's why I will increment my I until it will reach the number of rows. And inside this for loop, I will run another for loop, and it will be run under the number of columns. And each time when I see that the element in the matrix is equal to 0, I will just put the I will change the value in my arrays, and where the default values are false, and the particular index, for example for rows, it will be under the index I will change the default value to true, and in the calls array under index of j also I will change the default value to true. After I will collect, I will find out at which rows and columns there are zeros. I will run again my for loop through the matrix. Again the same definitions for loop. So I my for rows, and my j is for columns. And here either I will see for one of the conditions when row will be equal to true, or the columns array will be true, like or here is a J, sorry. I will be changing the value inside the matrix to 0. I will be reassigning it to 0. And at the end, I will just return the modified two-dimensional array. So time complexity for this solution is, since I'm using the two double for loops, so here the time complexity will be O m multiplied by n. So here again we have m multiplied by n. So basically it's since it's two-dimensional array, it will be the number of elements. So how many number of elements will we have in the array? So it will be just n from here and the n from the second for loop, and time complexity will be n plus n to n. So we're rounding it up to on, and space will be, here we're using two arrays, columns and rows, so the size of first one will be m and the second is n, so it will be basically the space will be m multiplied by n, so it will be rounded also to order of n.